Hello Internet, and welcome to another episode of Doggo Yaps. It's a serious Rai Yap, and today we'll be taking a deep dive into the most unused limited 5-star in Honkai Star Rail. Now before we start, disclaimer, this video strives to discuss on the facts of the game, and in the end it is just my opinion. Feel free to disagree, but I hope you keep it civil. I'll also be assuming 5-star characters to be at E0 as 1, which is simply the most common case. Now that that's out the way, let's get into it. Today we'll be talking about Jingliu, which was known to be the best DPS around a year ago when she was released, and she was actually able to hold her throne as the best DPS for quite some time. Fast forward to today, Jingliu has a shocking 0.5 usage rate across all 3 endgame modes on their hardest stage via the data collected by Prithvid. Now it is important to note that the data does not represent the whole player base, but it is the best source that I can find that showcases how many people uses Jingliu at all as a limited 5-star. And I mean honestly, without sourcing anything, playing Jingliu today at all feels rather tough in this version. And before we continue, it is still important for me to say, this is not to say Jingliu is not usable at all, but it's more to say people are going to have a harder time using Jingliu. And yet, let's start by breaking down why that is. We'll have to explore her kit to start. To address the elephant in the room with her kit, it would be with one of her major traits named Death Realm. This major trait provides her with 35% effect resistance. Now the problem with this isn't quite to say FRES is bad, however it does take away a potential major trait that could have boosted her damage even more. Not to mention, 35% FRES is rather awkward as it isn't consistent enough for you to just be immune to every and all debuffs. Well, unless you pair it with Ventrine and still add a tad more FRES through her relics. But then if you do that, you'll be trading some extra stats for FRES on her, and it's also fair to argue that it's better to just cleanse debuffs anyway. Compare Jingliu to every other modern day DPS, none of the new DPSs obtain a defensive major trait, and rather, they just get to specialize on attacking or gaining damage related stats. Now there are exceptions like Jingliu, who receives 20% damage reduction and CC immunity during her parry state from her trace, but that is to do with her unique kit that needs her to literally get attacked constantly. With the case of Jingliu, where she is clearly a glass cannon DPS through and through, a major trait that gives her more damage would have made more sense, but then back in the day, the enemies did not have the 3 million HP that we see today, which still made her strong before anyway, and that would be one of the reasons why Jingliu isn't as prominent as she is before. Her kit simply loses some raw numbers that could have been really good. And with that brings us to our next point. The enemies. You see, there are a myriad of enemies in Star Rail, each with their own gimmick and of course their own weaknesses. Unfortunately though, in the current version, we are slammed with absolutely zero ice weaknesses. In fact, Pure Fiction has an ice resistant boss, and even MOC 11 we have a full wave of ice resistant enemies. On top of all of that, the boss's gimmick certainly does not help our blindfolded Bobby as well, as we see that in all 3 of the modes, the buffs are all related to weakness breaking enemies. So for an ice element Jingliu that does not have the weakness on the enemies, she just simply can't break anyone. Not only that, the enemies themselves, like with the triple elite boss in MOC 12 or the conductor boss in Apocalyptic Shadow, are all designed to be defeated by weakness breaking them, as you obtain a lot of benefits by doing so. The combination of all of this has caused an ice element DPS like Jingliu to just be in the worst spot she has ever been, with Yanqing suffering an even worse fate at 0.01% total usage rate. God, I just feel bad for the guy now, even for a standard banner character. With all of that said, it is rather obvious that the meta of the game right now is weakness breaking enemies, which simply favors certain characters of the break archetype or characters that are able to ignore element or is of the right element. All of which simply is not the case for Jingliu, which goes to show just how tough the game is for her currently. Now that we've seen and discussed about the game as a whole, let's take a deeper look into Jingliu herself. Honkai Star Rail has came up with a few main archetypes of characters and teams, namely the dot team, full attack, break/super break, and Acheron. Yep, Acheron is probably her own type considering how unique she is, a nihility crit damage dealer. Even within these types, dot is certainly at the back foot of the other 3, but in the case of Jingliu though, you pretty much can't even put her into any of these. Obviously, she lacks the kit to be called a dot character, follow up, or break character. However, she also lacks the raw damage output these days to be treated as Acheron. This does make it so that she really doesn't have her own best team yet. Unlike all the mainstream break DPS or full-out attack DPS. The most popular team for Jingliu usually consists of a guaranteed Bronya at her side with slightly less speed so that Jingliu can use her skill twice instantly in order to get her into transmigration state, where she does the most damage. To complete the rest of the team, it is usually the best buffers in Robin/Ruan-Mei and a sustain to end. The thing is though, Robin and Ruan-Mei are designed to benefit their own archetypes more than a direct crit DPS like Jingliu. Not to mention the way Jingliu is designed, unless you own Eidolons on Bronya, her skill's buff effect will run out on Jingliu if Jingliu takes her extra turn as she activates transmigration state, since it only lasts for one turn. Now certainly there are ways to minimize this damage loss, like activating her ult before she takes the extra turn, but then still, if she takes the extra turn, eventually she will still lose the Bronya buff on her skill. Without a team that fits her perfectly, it does contribute to a much lower usage rate to begin with. Sometimes you would think, why don't I just pair Robin with, say, Fei Xiao? Or why don't I just use Ruan-Mei with Firefly? And the list goes on, and it's going to be quite a long list until you consider the fact that you would pair them with Jingliu. Now, if the enemies were at least weak against Ice Element though, I'm sure Jingliu's usage will rise up. However, even from previous weeks, her usage did not rise too much as the Aventurine boss favored more single target damage dealers, which for multi-target Jingliu isn't quite ideal. Now, of course, I'm sure she can deal high damage when you put Eidolons in the equation, for example, using an E2 Robin with her. However, that isn't quite accessible to most people, right? And hence why in today's video, we won't be really touching on any Eidolons, because if there are Eidolons, well, I'm sure every character would be very usable. And with that, we can make a conclusion on Jingliu's scenario in the current meta in Star Rail. I would say it's a combination of a lot of things that made Jingliu not really as strong at all as before. You have the clear show of every endgame mode being skewed towards break DPS or the break archetype, and it would seem that an entire game's meta will change according to what the banner are featuring, right? If the banner has a break character, the buffs are likely to help the break archetype. If the banners are of the full-up attack variant, you are gonna see more buffs related to FUA, which does pose the question, when will characters like Jingliu that doesn't really put herself in any categories ever get to shine again? Now, I'm sure you could say Jingliu can still shine in a break-oriented team, with the enemy being weak against ice, and perhaps that is true. However, though, from at least what we have seen recently, we have seen zero ice weakness enemies, and even if they were, it is someone like Aventurine that really prefers if you would just do single target damage and break him as fast as you can, to the point where people might rather just use Yanqing instead of Jingliu. Combine that with the fact that Jingliu doesn't really have the perfect team for her yet that can fully utilize her kit, which I would say is what someone like Fei Xiao already has, like a whole team helping her out. It is going to be tough for Jingliu to ever be considered when you already own really strong teams like an Acheron team, a Fei Xiao team, or say even a Firefly team. To talk about the future though, would Jingliu simply just disappear into oblivion, or will she ever get a return? And in my opinion, I think and I hope that she gets a return in the meta, and the way that it would happen is very simply if the enemies introduced in the future are weak against ice and are of like multiple targets. However, that alone though is not really enough for a Jingliu without the perfect team to really be picked over, say, just using a Firefly team, which is why in the future I'm really looking forward to strong harmony characters or debuffers that can really help these old characters get their footing back and have their own archetype. Perhaps it will be called the direct crit damage archetype, since that's really what Jingliu does. With the upcoming version, we do see Sunday and the new Tingyuan, and perhaps they have a kit that could help all of these older DPSs to find their footing and showcase their might again. But for now, Jingliu is considered the lowest used limited 5-star for this month and version across all of the modes. And with that marks the end of why I think Jingliu is being very much unused. Let me know as well what you think. But before we end though, do note that this is all just my opinion and observation. I'm not saying she cannot defeat the content in the game at all, but more so we're just diving into how she became the least chosen limited 5-star for endgame content today. I hope I didn't offend anyone, and if you are a Jingliu main, you know what? You could share in the comments below of how your experience is with Jingliu in the current version. Me personally, I certainly did not have the best of experiences, but hey, if I really wish to, I can still force my way to a 3-star clear in the MC12 using Jingliu. I just gotta 0 cycle the other side though. And with that, I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know as well what you think about video essays like these. And that'll be all. Take care.